I still remember the exact sound Marcus made when he shook his lawyer's hand. That sharp, satisfied clap of palms, the kind of sound a man makes when he thinks he's won. I was standing 12 feet away in the hallway of the Harris County Civil Courthouse, Houston, Texas, on a Wednesday morning in late March. I was wearing my gray blazer, the one I'd bought myself after my first patent approval. My hands were folded in front of me. My face was calm, and I watched my husband of 9 years sign his name on the last page of our divorce settlement like he was autographing a trophy. He took the house on Briar Grove Drive. He took both cars. He took the $214,000 in our joint investment account. He took the patent I had spent 4 years of my life building from nothing. He took everything. And then he looked across that hallway at me, that slow, satisfied look.
You'll be okay, Renata. You're a survivor.
Like he was doing me a favor. What Marcus Doucet did not know, what he couldn't have known, was that he had just signed his name on the worst deal of his life. Twice. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because trust me, you are going to want to hear every second of what comes next. Let me take you back. Back to the beginning when Marcus Doucet was the man I thought I'd spend my whole life loving. My name is Renata Simona Doucet. I'm 41 years old. And for most of my adult life, I believed that if you worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and gave everything you had to the people who mattered, the universe would eventually balance the books. I was wrong about that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in the 3rd Ward in Houston, the second of 3 daughters born to Patricia and Gerald Simone. Daddy was an electrician who could fix anything with his hands. Mama taught 2nd grade at Burbank Elementary for 31 years. We weren't wealthy, but we were solid, stable. The kind of family where dinner was on the table at 6:30 every night and church was non-negotiable every Sunday morning. I was the quiet one, the one with her nose in a textbook always asking why things worked the way they did. Why did the lights come on when you flipped the switch? Why did blood carry oxygen but not nitrogen? Why did certain materials conduct electricity while others refused? My daddy used to call me his little professor. My mama called me her question mark. My younger sister, Simone. Yes, she's my namesake. It's a whole family thing, just called me Nada, and rolled her eyes every time I explained something she didn't ask about. I went to Prairie View A&M on a full academic scholarship, studied biomedical engineering, graduated summa cum laude in 2005, got my master's from Rice University 2 years later. By 32, I was a senior engineer at MedAxis Corporation, one of the top medical device companies in the Southwest, working out of their research campus off the Energy Corridor in West Houston. My project, the one I'd been leading for 4 years by the time this story begins, was a non-invasive cardiac monitoring device specifically designed for type 2 diabetic patients. People with diabetes have a significantly elevated risk of heart disease, but standard cardiac monitors aren't calibrated for their specific physiological variations. Our device was. We called it the Clear Pulse System. My co-inventor was Dr. Priya Mehta, our lead clinical researcher, a woman so precise and methodical, she made me look scattered by comparison. We'd been working side by side for 6 years. She was one of the few people at MedAxis I trusted completely. The work was consuming, and I loved every minute of it. I was in the lab by 7 most mornings. Some nights I didn't leave until 9 or 10. It wasn't burnout, it was purpose. Every refinement we made to ClearPulse potentially meant fewer missed cardiac events in diabetic patients, fewer families getting that phone call. That mattered to me in a way I couldn't always explain to people who didn't feel it the same way. And then there was Marcus. Marcus Doucet came into my life at a fundraising gala for Texas Children's Hospital in the fall of 2013. He was 44 years old, 6'2", with a laugh that filled up a room and a way of looking at you that made you feel like the most interesting person in the world. He'd built Doucet Group LLC from the ground up, a commercial real estate development firm that had reshaped several blocks of Midtown Houston. He wore his success lightly, or so I thought. He talked about his work with passion but never arrogance. He asked about mine with what seemed like genuine curiosity. Our first real conversation lasted 2 hours. He wanted to know everything about biomedical engineering, what drew me to it, what I was working on, what kept me up at night. I wasn't used to men like that, men who leaned in when you talked about your work instead of glazing over. I told Simone about him the next day.
Nada, be careful. Men who ask too many questions about your work aren't always interested in the work.
I didn't listen. I should have. We dated for 14 months, got married in October 2015 at a small ceremony at Emancipation Park, bought the house on Briar Grove Drive, 3,400 square feet, 4 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for the garden I always wanted. We talked about children. We talked about the future. For the first 2 years, it was everything I'd imagined a marriage could be. Marcus was attentive, generous. He remembered the small things, the brand of tea I liked, the way I needed total silence. When I was working through a problem, the fact that I called my mama every Sunday evening without fail. He came to my work presentations when I invited him. He told his business partners about my research like he was proud of every word. He had a colleague he mentioned often in those early years, Vanessa Cole. She ran business development at a commercial leasing firm that partnered with Doucet Group on several projects. I met her twice at company events, once at Doucet Group's 5th anniversary celebration, once at a holiday party. She was polished, confident, the kind of woman who worked a room with ease. Marcus introduced her as one of his most reliable professional partners. I shook her hand both times and thought nothing of it. I want you to remember Vanessa Cole, because she matters, more than I knew. The first year of our marriage, I was finishing my master's documentation for the ClearPulse patent application. Marcus would sometimes come into my home office late at night with a cup of tea, lean against the doorframe, and watch me work.
You're going to change medicine,
he said one night. I'm going to change outcomes for a specific patient population, I corrected him. It's smaller than changing medicine.
It's not smaller. It's more important.
I believed he meant it, every word. But there was one moment, small, easy to miss, that I filed away in the back of my mind and didn't take out again until much later. It was a Tuesday evening in April 2018. I'd left a draft of the patent application on my desk, the technical summary page face up. Marcus came in to tell me dinner was ready. He paused at the desk, picked up the page, read it for longer than you'd need to read it if you were just curious.
How much does something like this end up being worth, commercially, I mean, when it gets licensed?
I shrugged. Depends on adoption. Could be significant if a major manufacturer picks it up. He nodded slowly and set the page back down.
Good to know.
I went back to my screen. I told myself it was the kind of question any spouse might ask, the kind of question that came from interest, not calculation. Looking back now, that wasn't curiosity. It was reconnaissance. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't understand for another 3 years, was that Marcus had already begun building a different kind of plan. One that had nothing to do with our future together and everything to do with what he could take when that future ended. I also didn't know that Vanessa Cole had become something far more than a professional partner. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Before all of that, there were 9 years, and some of them were genuinely beautiful. You need to understand that before you understand how badly it all broke. Let me tell you about the good years first, because they were real, and because you need to feel what I felt before you can understand what it meant to lose it. Marcus and I had a Sunday morning ritual that lasted for most of our marriage. We'd wake up late, no alarms, no phones, and he'd make his grandmother's chicory coffee while I made beignets from a recipe Simone had sent me from New Orleans. We'd sit at the kitchen island in our robes, the backyard visible through the sliding glass doors, and just talk. About nothing. About everything. His latest project. My latest data set. What we wanted to do when we finally took that trip to Portugal. We kept planning and never booking. Those Sunday mornings felt like the truest version of our marriage. Unhurried. Easy. The kind of quiet that only exists between two people who genuinely like each other. Marcus was funny in a way that snuck up on you, dry observational, always timing his delivery perfectly. He could make me laugh so hard I had to set down my coffee. He danced terribly and knew it and did it anyway just to make me smile. When I was deep in a difficult phase of the ClearPulse research months, where the clinical data wasn't cooperating and I was questioning every assumption we'd built the device on, he would sit beside me at my desk without saying a word. Just present. Just there.
I don't know what you need right now,
He told me once during one of those stretches.
but I'm not going anywhere until you figure it out.
I thought that was love. I thought that was the man I married. The cracks when they came were so small, I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. It started sometime in early 2020. The pandemic had reshuffled everything MedAccess pivoted some of our resources toward COVID-related research, which slowed the ClearPulse timeline. Marcus's real estate business took a significant hit as commercial leasing dried up. We were both under pressure in ways we hadn't been before. I told myself that explained the distance I started feeling, the short answers, the evenings where he'd come home distracted and disappear into his office until midnight. I gave him grace. That's what you do in a marriage. You give grace. But grace has a way of blinding you to things you should be seeing clearly. The first real shift I noticed was in how Marcus talked about my work. Those Sunday mornings continued, but the texture changed. Where he used to ask questions that showed he'd been listening, real questions, specific questions, he started asking different ones, broader, more financial.
Where are you with the patent filing? Is that finalized? Has Priya talked to any manufacturers yet? Anyone making offers? What happens to the patent if MedAccess decides not to commercialize it themselves? Does it revert to you?
I answered every question. I thought it was interest. I thought he was worried about our financial future given the hit Doucette Group had taken. I thought he was trying to understand what we had in our corner. I was answering a deposition I didn't know I was giving. Then came the evening in September 2021 that I still think about. Marcus had been on his phone during dinner, not unusual by then, but something about his energy that night felt different. Guarded, like he was holding something back behind his eyes. After dinner, he said he was going for a drive. He did that sometimes when he needed to think, so I didn't question it. He was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, he smelled faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. Not strongly, just a trace. The kind of thing you notice and then immediately try to find an explanation for. I told myself he'd probably stopped somewhere, a restaurant maybe, stood near someone. I told myself a lot of things that night. 2 days later, I was looking for a charger in Marcus's car and found a receipt in the center console. Dinner for 2 at Wheezy's table. That same night. The bill was $340. Marcus had told me he needed to drive and think. I stood in the garage holding that receipt for a long time. My hands were very still. The kind of still that comes not from calm, but from the opposite of calm, from something locking down inside you. Because it knows that if it lets go, everything will fall. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it. I went inside, I made tea. I sat at the kitchen island where we had our Sunday mornings, and I looked at the backyard, and I thought, I could be wrong. People eat alone. Maybe he met a client last minute. Maybe there's an explanation. I didn't ask him about it, not that night. I called Simone instead, told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment, then said,
Nada, you need to start paying attention. Not hoping. Paying attention. There's a difference.
She was right, but I wasn't ready to cross that line yet, because crossing it meant something I couldn't take back. A week later at Marcus's company holiday party, Doucette Group rented out a space at the Post in downtown Houston. I saw Vanessa Cole for the 3rd time. She arrived late in a deep burgundy dress, and the way Marcus's posture changed when she walked in was subtle enough that I almost missed it. Almost. He didn't go to her immediately. He was smart about it. He waited 40 minutes, moved naturally across the room, and then they were talking in a corner near the bar. I watched from across the room. Priya was beside me and she touched my arm gently.
You okay?
She asked quietly. I'm fine, I said. I wasn't fine. At one point during the evening, Marcus was standing in a group of 4 people, 2 of his partners, their wives. Vanessa was not in the group. I walked over and slipped my hand into his. He smiled at me, introduced me, said all the right things. But later when we were leaving, when I asked him how Vanessa was doing, casual light, just her name dropped into conversation, something moved across his face so fast I almost couldn't name it. Calculation. That's what it was. A split second of calculation before the easy smile came back.
She's good, same as always.
I nodded. I said nothing. But something inside me had shifted. The grace I'd been handing out so freely had quietly, without announcement, started running out. And somewhere in the back of my mind, in the place where I kept the things I wasn't ready to face yet, I heard Simone's voice. Not hoping, paying attention. I started paying attention. What I found over the next 3 months would take everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my life, and reduce it to something unrecognizable. But the worst part, it wasn't just the betrayal. It was the plan. The careful, deliberate, patient plan that had been running underneath our marriage like a current under still water. I just didn't know yet how deep it went. I want to be honest about something. I am not the kind of woman who goes through her husband's phone. I never had been. I believed that a marriage without trust was just a legal arrangement with furniture, and I'd built 9 years on the foundation of giving Marcus the benefit of every doubt I had. But Simone's words had changed something in me, and that receipt from Weesey's table had planted a seed that no matter how many times I tried to pull it up, kept pushing back through the soil. So in December 2021, I did something I'd never done before. I sat down at Marcus's home office desk while he was in the shower, opened his laptop. He'd never changed the password from the one I'd set up for him when we first got the computer, and I looked. I told myself I was looking for proof that I was wrong, that I'd find nothing, that I'd close the laptop, feel relieved and slightly ashamed, and go back to giving him grace. Instead, I found the emails. Not the ones about Vanessa, not yet. What I found first was a folder labeled simply Restructuring, and inside it a chain of emails between Marcus and a man named Derek Nolan, a family law attorney based in Greenway Plaza. The earliest email in the chain was dated February 14th, 2021. Valentine's Day. That morning, Marcus had made me breakfast in bed. Strawberries and cream the way I liked.
9 years and you still make me want to be better.
He'd kissed my forehead and said it. That same afternoon, he had emailed a divorce attorney asking for an initial consultation. I read that email 3 times. Each time the words rearranged themselves into something I couldn't fully absorb. Then I kept reading. The chain was extensive. Marcus and Derek had been communicating for almost 10 months. They had discussed asset division in careful detail, the house, the vehicles, the investment accounts. And then in an email from August 2021, Derek had written, "Regarding the biomedical patent, we'll need to confirm the exact ownership structure. If it was developed during the marriage and registered under her name alone, we can make a strong argument for marital asset classification. Get me whatever documentation you can on the filing."
Already on it.
Marcus's reply came 12 minutes later. Already on it. I thought about every question he'd asked me about the patent over the past 2 years. Every casual, curious, interested question. I thought about the night he'd picked up the technical summary page and asked how much it might be worth commercially. He hadn't been proud of my work. He'd been inventorying it. My hands were completely steady when I closed the laptop. That terrified me more than shaking would have. I went to the kitchen. I stood at the counter. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I heard Marcus moving around getting dressed, doing the ordinary things a man does in the morning. And I stood very still and understood that the life I was living had a false floor, and I had just fallen through it. When he came downstairs, he was in a good mood, relaxed. He poured himself coffee, asked what I wanted to do for dinner, mentioned a restaurant he'd heard about in Montrose. I looked at him across the kitchen island, our kitchen island where we'd had 1,000 Sunday mornings, and I said nothing about what I'd found. Not because I was afraid, because I needed to understand the full shape of what I was dealing with before I said a single word. That evening, I called Simone. I told her everything. She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped.
Hi, Nada. How long has this been going on?
At least 10 months that I can document. Probably longer. Another silence.
You need a lawyer. Not tomorrow, tonight.
3 days later, Marcus and I attended a dinner party at the home of his business partner, Raymond Okafor, and Raymond's wife, Denise. There were 8 people at the table. Vanessa Cole was one of them. I hadn't known she'd be there. Marcus had mentioned it was a small work dinner. He had not mentioned her name. She sat directly across from me. She was gracious, warm, asked me thoughtful questions about my research. She was very good. I'll give her that. She was very, very good. Halfway through the meal, Raymond made a toast about Duce Group's upcoming development project, a mixed-use complex in Edu that Marcus had been working toward for 2 years. Marcus stood briefly, thanked everyone, said something about building things that last. Then Raymond said, "And of course, none of this happens without Vanessa. She locked down 3 of our anchor tenants. This woman is irreplaceable." Marcus raised his glass toward her. And the look that passed between them, fast, private, the kind of look that has its own language, lasted less than 2 seconds. But I saw it, and Denise Okafor, seated to my left, saw me see it. She put her hand briefly over mine under the table, said nothing, just that small, quiet gesture of a woman who understood. On the drive home, I was silent. Marcus filled the space with easy conversation about the project, the dinner, Raymond's new car. He was in an excellent mood. Then he said it. Unprompted, relaxed, like he was commenting on the weather.
You know, I've been thinking. You spent so much time in that lab, Renata. 4 years on one project. I've been carrying the weight of this household, the social obligations, the financial planning, all of it, while you've been in your head. You're brilliant in a very small room. I need a partner who can live in the real world with me.
He said it like an observation, like he was being honest with me for my own benefit. I turned and looked at his profile in the dark of the car, the streetlights moving across his face. That face I had loved for 9 years. Is that right? I said, not a question, just 2 words flat and even.
I'm just being real with you. I think we need to talk about some things.
I turned back to the window. Okay, let's talk. But what I was thinking was this. You have been planning this for 10 months that I know of. You have been asking questions about my patent for years. You have been sitting across from your girlfriend at dinner tables while I shook her hand. And you have just told me to my face that you are the one who has been carrying this marriage. I didn't say any of that. I stored it. Every word. The way you store kindling. Because I had just decided something there in the dark of that car on the drive home from Raymond Okafor's dinner party. I was going to find out everything. Every last thing. And then I was going to make very, very careful decisions about what to do with it. 3 days later, he served me with divorce papers. And they were exactly as specific about the Clear Pulse patent as Derek Nolan's emails had promised they would be. I was not surprised, but I was ready to be devastated. Because sometimes you have to let yourself feel the full weight of a betrayal before you can lift it. Divorce papers have a particular weight when you hold them for the first time. Not physical weight, the pages are light ordinary. But something about the legal language, the formal structure, the way your name appears in cold print next to words like dissolution and respondent, it hits different than anything you've prepared yourself for. I sat with them at my kitchen table for 45 minutes before I called anyone. Derek Nolan had done thorough work. The petition was detailed, organized, and clearly written by someone who had been building toward it for a long time. It listed every significant asset Marcus and I shared. The house on Briar Grove Drive valued at $890,000. 2 vehicles. The joint investment account. Marcus's Ducet Group holdings listed as heavily leveraged, current value uncertain, which I noted but didn't fully understand yet. And at the bottom of the asset list, item 7, Clear Pulse Biomedical Patent Application. Number 16/847293, filed March 2020, registered to Renata S. Ducet during the course of the marriage. Respondent asserts classification as marital property subject to equitable division. 4 years of my life, reduced to a line item. I called Simone first.
Get a lawyer today.
Then I called Priya. I didn't tell her everything, just that Marcus was filing for divorce and that he was claiming the patent. She went very quiet.
Renata, call me back when you have a lawyer. there's something you need to know about our co-inventor agreement.
I didn't know what she meant yet. I filed it away. I found Joanna Park through a colleague at MedAxis whose sister had gone through a difficult divorce 2 years prior. Joanna was 49 years old, based in River Oaks, with 22 years of family law experience and a reputation for being the kind of attorney opposing counsel did not enjoy encountering. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and had the particular stillness of someone who had heard every variety of human disaster and remained unbothered by all of them. She read the petition carefully. She asked precise questions.
His attorney is Derek Nolan. That tells me your husband has been planning this for a while. Derek doesn't get hired last minute.
I know, I said. I have the emails. She smiled small approving.
Good, hold on to those.
The weeks that followed were the longest of my life. Marcus moved out of the house on Briar Grove and into a high-rise apartment in Midtown, a furnished 2-bedroom that he'd apparently secured before he served me the papers. He took his personal belongings with a precision that told me he'd been mentally packing for months. No argument, no scene, no drama. Just efficiency. The efficiency of a man executing a plan he'd spent considerable time refining. Within 2 weeks, he stopped being careful about Vanessa. She started appearing in his social media Doucet Group's Instagram, his personal accounts. Professional photos, at first business events, project announcements, then a dinner tagged at Uchi on Westheimer, then a weekend trip posted by a mutual friend. Houston is not a small town, but it can feel like one when you're watching your husband step publicly into a life he built while he was still sleeping in your bed. I heard about it mostly through Denise Okafor, who called me twice during that period, voice careful and kind. She told me Vanessa had been at Raymond's office twice in 1 week. She told me Marcus had introduced her differently at a recent event, not as a business partner, but as a companion. Denise had been my quiet ally since that dinner party. She didn't offer opinions. She just gave me information gently, like someone passing water to a person in a desert. Then came the mediation session. The first one. It was held in Derek Nolan's conference room on the 23rd floor of a building on Post Oak Boulevard. Marcus arrived in a suit I didn't recognize new. Expensive, the kind of thing you buy when you're celebrating something. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had already decided how this ended. Derek Nolan was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-50s, silver-haired with the particular brand of polished aggression that expensive divorce attorneys cultivate over decades. He laid out Marcus's position with smooth efficiency. The house would go to Marcus. He'd been the primary financial contributor, he argued, which was a creative interpretation of 9 years of dual-income marriage. The investment account would be split with a weighted adjustment in Marcus's favor. The patent would be classified as marital property and transferred entirely to Marcus, given that MedAxis's corporate resources had contributed to its development, and Marcus's financial support of the household had enabled Renata's research capacity. I watched Marcus while Derek spoke. He was looking at his phone, barely listening, like this was a formality he'd already settled in his own mind. Joanna pushed back on every point with precision. But when the patent came up, Derek leaned forward and said something that made the room temperature drop several degrees. "Mrs. Doucet," he said, looking directly at me, not at Joanna, "I want to be very clear about our position. We will litigate the patent classification fully if necessary. That will take 18 to 24 months, cost you significant legal fees, and create substantial professional complications given your employment at MedAxis. We are offering you a clean exit. I'd encourage you to consider what prolonged litigation costs you personally and professionally before you decide how hard to fight this." It was a threat dressed in reasonable language, but it was a threat. Marcus looked up from his phone then. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face in 9 years of marriage. Not anger, not guilt, something colder than both.
Nobody's going to fight for you on this, Renata. You know that, right? Joanna's billing you by the hour. Priya's not going to blow up her own career over your feelings. Take what we're offering. You're a smart woman. Act like it.
The room went very still. Joanna's pen stopped moving. I looked at Marcus for a long moment. The man who used to sit beside me in silence when the data wasn't cooperating. The man who said, "I'm not going anywhere until you figure it out." "Are we done for today?" I said to Joanna.
We're done.
We left. In the elevator going down, Joanna stood beside me and said nothing for a moment.
He just made a significant mistake.
"Which one?"
He told you nobody would fight for you. In front of a witness. That kind of contempt tends to motivate people in ways that desperation doesn't.
She was right, because that night I called Priya back, and she told me about the co-inventor agreement. And I sat very still for a long time after she finished talking. And then for the first time since Marcus had served me those papers, I felt something shift in my chest. Not hope exactly. Something quieter than hope and more dangerous. Clarity. But before I could do anything with it, things got considerably worse. Because Marcus wasn't finished, and neither was his mother. Carla Doucet had always been cordial to me. That's the precise word, cordial. Not warm, not welcoming. Cordial the way a hotel concierge is cordial. Polite at the right moments, present at the required occasions, careful never to give me anything I could point to as evidence of dislike. In 9 years, she had called me sweetheart exactly twice, both times in front of other people. She had attended our wedding, sent birthday cards that were always signed simply Carla, and referred to MedAxis as Renata's little research job at every family gathering without apparent awareness of how that landed. I had never confronted her about any of it. I had given her the same grace I gave everyone. That grace ran out on a Tuesday morning in January 2022. I was in a meeting with my department head at MedAxis, a routine project status update, when my phone lit up with a text from a colleague named Bernard who worked in HR. The text said only, "Hey, can you stop by when you're out? Something came up. Nothing urgent, but you should know." After the meeting, I went to Bernard's office. He closed the door, which he rarely did, and sat across from me with the careful expression of someone delivering information they wish they didn't have. "I got a call yesterday," he said, from someone who identified herself as a concerned family member. She said she wanted to flag some worries about your emotional state. Said you'd been under significant personal stress and that she was concerned about your ability to focus on sensitive research. I felt my stomach drop straight through the floor. She mentioned the divorce, Bernard continued. Said she thought it was affecting your judgment. She suggested, and I want to be clear, she was very polished about this, very careful with her words. She suggested that it might be worth reviewing your current level of access to confidential research materials. "What was her name?" I asked. Bernard hesitated. "She didn't leave a full name, but she said she was your mother-in-law." "Carla?" I sat very still. Bernard was watching me with something between sympathy and discomfort. "I want you to know," he said, "that I documented the call and flagged it immediately to legal as an inappropriate external contact. We're not taking any action, but I thought you should know it happened." I thanked him. I walked back to my office. I closed my own door and stood at my window looking out at the energy corridor. And I thought about 9 years of cordial, 9 years of sweetheart in front of other people and Renata's little research job at family dinners. She had tried to get me removed from my own research, the research that Marcus wanted to take from me. The coordination of that, the deliberateness of it settled into my chest like a stone. That evening, I called Priya and told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said,
"Renata, I need to tell you something now. I should have told you sooner, and I'm sorry I waited."
"Tell me," I said. She took a breath.
3 weeks ago, I was contacted by a company called Helios MedTech. They're a mid-sized medical device manufacturer based out of Minneapolis. They've been tracking ClearPulse through industry publications for about a year. They want to acquire the patent.
The room felt like it tilted slightly. "How much?" I asked.
Their opening offer is $4.2 million, split between us per the co-inventor agreement.
$4.2 million. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I don't remember deciding to sit down. My legs just made that decision without consulting me. "Priya," I said carefully, "Marcus is claiming the patent as a marital asset. He's been planning this for at least a year. If he gets it in the settlement..."
He can't. That's what I need you to understand. Pull out our co-inventor agreement. The original from 2019. Read Section 4, Paragraph 3.
I found the agreement in my filing cabinet. My hands were steadier than they had any right to be. I found Section 4, Paragraph 3, and I read it. No party to this agreement may transfer, assign, convey, or otherwise dispose of any ownership interest in the jointly held invention without the express written consent of all co-inventors. Any attempted transfer made without such consent shall be void and of no legal effect pursuant to 35 U.S.C. Section 261. I read it twice, then a third time. He doesn't know you're on this patent, I said slowly.
No. He's never seen the co-inventor agreement? The patent filing has both our names, but Marcus only ever saw the summary documents on your desk, the ones that listed you as lead inventor. He never asked about co-inventors. He didn't know to ask.
The truth didn't just land. It detonated. Marcus had spent a year planning to steal a patent he could never legally own. He had coordinated with a divorce attorney for 10 months, asked me careful questions for years, had his mother call my HR department. All of it, the entire architecture of his plan, was built on an assumption he'd never bothered to verify. If he received the patent in the divorce settlement, the transfer would be void under federal intellectual property law. He would hold a document with no enforceable legal value. And the $4.2 million acquisition from Helios MedTech, the deal that Priya was holding open, that was sitting right there ready, would proceed without him. Every dollar going to us. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. What I felt in that moment was not triumph. Not yet. What I felt was something more complicated, a grief that had been waiting for permission to arrive. Because understanding the full scope of Marcus's plan meant understanding that almost nothing in our marriage had been what I thought it was. The questions about the patent, the careful financial positioning, the deliberate erosion of my confidence. You're brilliant in a very small room, designed to make me feel lucky to accept whatever he offered. He hadn't been planning to leave me. He had been planning to leave me with nothing. I cried for about 20 minutes. Hard, ugly, full-body crying that I'd been holding back for months. Then I washed my face, made tea, called Joanna Park. I need to tell you something about the patent, I said when she answered. She listened to everything. When I finished, the line was quiet for several seconds.
Renata, don't contest the patent. Let him take it.
I know, I said.
You've already thought this through.
Most of it. But there's something else. In those emails between Marcus and Derek, there were some financial disclosures about Doucet Group that didn't add up to me. Marcus kept telling Derek the company was heavily leveraged, near insolvent. But 2 months ago, he mentioned a prospective sale at a significant profit margin. I don't know what that means legally, but...
It means he may have been misrepresenting his assets to the court, which is a different problem entirely. Send me everything.
I sent her everything. And then I did something I hadn't done since this whole thing began. I slept. A full, deep, dreamless sleep. The kind that comes not from peace, but from having finally, after months of drowning, found solid ground beneath your feet. The ground wasn't peace, but it was a plan. And Marcus, at that exact moment, was celebrating what he thought was his inevitable victory. He had no idea that the thing he wanted most was already gone, and that the thing he thought was least valuable was about to burn everything else down. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes over you when you stop being afraid and start being deliberate. It doesn't feel like courage, not at first. It feels more like a temperature drop, like something warm and panicked inside you finally goes still and cold and focused. That's what happened to me in the 2 weeks after I talked to Priya and Joanna. I stopped crying. I stopped replaying conversations in my head looking for the moments where I could have seen it. Sooner said something different, changed the outcome. I stopped doing the thing I'd been doing for months, trying to understand Marcus's choices through the lens of the man I thought I'd married. That man was a story I'd told myself. And I was done with that story. I started paying attention to a different story. The one written in the financial documents. Joanna had asked me to send everything I had from Marcus's emails with Derek Nolan. I had 17 months of correspondence copied the night I'd found them on his laptop, saved to an encrypted folder on my personal cloud account. I went through all of it again this time with fresh eyes. Not the eyes of a wife looking for evidence of betrayal, but the eyes of a biomedical engineer who understood how to read data and identify anomalies. The anomaly was significant. In his communications with Derek Marcus had consistently represented Doucette Group, LLC, as financially distressed. Heavily leveraged, he said. Uncertain current value. He'd provided documentation showing declining revenue-deferred maintenance costs on several properties, outstanding loans that exceeded current valuations. The picture he painted was of a company on shaky ground, barely worth including in the asset division conversation. But in a separate email thread, one he'd accidentally CC'd to our joint account 8 months prior, which I'd received skimmed and forgotten about until now, Marcus was communicating with a commercial real estate broker about a potential sale of Doucette Group's flagship property portfolio. The language was confident. The projected sale price was substantial. The broker's response referenced a potential buyer already in preliminary discussions. The numbers didn't reconcile. Not even close. Either Marcus was misrepresenting the company's value to the divorce court, or he was misrepresenting it to the buyer. Either way, someone was being lied to under circumstances that carried serious legal consequences. I forwarded everything to Joanna with a single line. "Tell me what you see." She called me back within 2 hours. Her voice had that particular quality it got when she was working through something significant. Measured, precise, each word placed carefully.
What I see is a pattern of financial misrepresentation in sworn legal proceedings. If Marcus filed asset disclosures with the court that materially understated Doucette Group's value, while simultaneously negotiating a sale at a significantly higher valuation, that's fraud on the court. It's also potentially tax fraud, depending on how the discrepancies were handled on his filings.
"What do we do with it?" I asked.
We don't do anything with it directly. It's not our job to prosecute tax fraud. But there are agencies whose job it is. And those agencies have tip lines. I am not telling you what to do. I am simply noting that the information exists and that there are appropriate channels through which it could be reported by any citizen who became aware of it.
I understood exactly what she was not telling me to do. "And our strategy for the settlement," I said.
It stays exactly the same. We let Marcus have everything he's asking for. The house, the accounts, the patent. And this is the critical part. We agree to his request to assume full ownership of Doucette Group, LLC, including all associated liabilities, debts, and legal obligations.
She paused to let that land.
He's going to push for that anyway. He thinks the company is his most valuable asset. He'll want full control, no shared liability, clean separation. We're going to give it to him. All of it. Every single obligation that comes with it.
"And when the IRS starts looking at the discrepancies," I said slowly,
he'll own 100% of the problem. We'll make sure the settlement language is airtight on that point. Every liability, past and future, associated with Doucette Group transfers entirely to Marcus upon execution of the agreement. His attorney will be pleased. They'll think we're folding.
I sat with that for a moment. The clean, elegant logic of it. "He's going to sign it," I said.
He's going to be delighted to sign it.
That night I called Simone. I told her the broad outlines. Not every detail, but enough. She was quiet while I talked. When I finished, she said,
Nada. You know what the difference is between you and Marcus.
I didn't answer.
He's been planning how to take something from you. You've been planning how to stop letting people take things from you. That's not the same kind of person.
She was right, and it mattered to me that she said it. Because in the middle of building a legal strategy, it was easy to lose sight of why it had to be done carefully, cleanly, without crossing lines. I wasn't interested in destroying Marcus. I was interested in not being destroyed by him. There's a difference, and I needed to stay clear on it. The following week, I met with Joanna to go over the settlement response. We agreed to every major point Marcus had demanded. The house, the vehicles, the investment account split, the patent, Doucette Group in its entirety, all assets and all liabilities, transferred solely to Marcus Doucette upon finalization. We asked for $47,000 in liquid assets in my personal vehicle. That was all. Joanna submitted our response to Derek Nolan on a Thursday afternoon. Derek called her back within 20 minutes. She told me later that he sounded almost confused, like a man who'd prepared for a fight and arrived to find the other side had already left the battlefield. He asked if I was certain. Joanna said I was. He said he'd have Marcus review it and get back to her. Marcus called me that evening. First time he'd called directly in weeks. His voice had a quality I recognized from our early years. Warm, expansive. The voice he used when things were going his way.
I just want to say that I think you're making a mature decision. This is better for both of us. A clean break.
I agree, I said.
I know this hasn't been easy, but I think in time you'll see that this was the right thing.
I'm sure I will, I said. After I hung up, I sat for a moment in the quiet of my soon-to-be former kitchen. The backyard was dark through the glass doors. The island where we'd had 1,000 Sunday mornings was just a counter now. Marble and wood. No memory attached to it anymore, or at least none with any power left. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just small and private and pointed towards something he couldn't see yet. Meanwhile, on the other side of Houston, in his midtown high-rise, Marcus Doucette was telling Vanessa Cole that he'd won, that I'd folded, that he'd gotten everything and paid almost nothing for it. He was so pleased with himself. He had no idea that he hadn't won anything. He had accepted a delivery, and inside that delivery, wrapped in legal language and signed by his own hand, was everything that was about to take him apart. The trap was set, every piece in place. All it needed now was time. The settlement signing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in late February. Joanna and I arrived at Derek Nolan's office at 9 a.m. sharp. I wore a navy blazer and my hair pulled back clean. No jewelry. Nothing that could be read as either defeat or defiance. Just a woman coming to sign papers and move on with her life. That was exactly what I needed Marcus to see. He was already there when we arrived. Sitting at the conference table with Derek a cup of coffee in front of him, scrolling his phone with the ease of a man who had nowhere more important to be. He looked good, rested. He'd gotten a haircut. He was wearing the watch, a new one I didn't recognize, silver and substantial, the kind of watch a man buys himself when he's celebrating. He stood when I walked in. Old habit. 9 years of manners don't disappear overnight.
Renata.
Marcus. We sat on opposite sides of the table. Derek walked us through the documents with practiced efficiency, page by page, clause by clause. The house, the vehicles, the investment account, the patent, and then Doucette Group, LLC, full ownership, all assets, all associated liabilities, and legal obligations, transferring entirely and irrevocably to Marcus Antoine Doucette upon execution and finalization of the agreement. Derek read that section with particular satisfaction, like a man who had negotiated a victory and wanted to make sure everyone in the room appreciated its dimensions. Marcus signed each page with a confident, unhurried hand. His signature hadn't changed in 9 years. Bold, forward-leaning, slightly oversized. The signature of a man who'd always believed his name carried weight. When it was my turn, I signed where indicated. Quietly. Without ceremony. At the last page, Marcus looked across the table at me. And then he said it, the thing I knew he'd been saving, the thing he'd been waiting for the right audience to deliver. Derek was there. Joanna was there. The paralegal taking notes was there. He wanted witnesses.
Take what I'm offering and disappear, Renata. That's the best thing you can do for yourself.
He said it like advice, like generosity, like he was doing me one final kindness on his way out the door. Joanna's pen went still beside me. The paralegal looked up from her notepad. Derek had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, which told me even he thought it had gone a half step too far. I looked at Marcus for a long moment. I thought about the chicory coffee in the Sunday mornings. I thought about the receipt from Wheezy's table. I thought about Valentine's Day, 2021 strawberries and cream, and an email sent to a divorce attorney that same afternoon. I thought about Carla calling Bernard in HR. I thought about the word reconnaissance and how long I'd been someone else's research project without knowing it. I picked up my copy of the signed agreement. I stood. "Thank you, Marcus." And I walked out. In the elevator, Joanna stood beside me. Neither of us spoke until the doors closed.
That last comment is going in my notes. Verbatim. Witnessed?
I know. That afternoon, I called Priya. We're clear. Move forward with Helios.
She exhaled a long, relieved breath. I'll call them today.
Then I drove to my new apartment. It was a 2-bedroom on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown, 3 miles from the house on Briar Grove Drive. I'd signed the lease 2 weeks prior, chosen the unit myself, paid the deposit from my own savings account, the one Marcus didn't know existed, the one I'd been maintaining quietly for 6 years under my maiden name, because some part of me, some careful analytical part, had always believed that a woman should have something of her own that no one else could reach. The apartment was small compared to what I'd left, 1,100 square feet. The kitchen faced east and got good morning light. The second bedroom I'd already decided would be my home office. The walls were white and bare and entirely mine. I stood in the middle of the living room with a cup of tea and looked at the empty space, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could accurately measure. Room. Just room. To think. To breathe. To be exactly who I was without anyone watching, cataloging or calculating the value of what I was building. Over the next 6 weeks, life on Marcus's side of Houston proceeded exactly as he'd planned. He moved into the house on Briar Grove. Vanessa began appearing there. Denise Okafor saw her car in the driveway on a Sunday afternoon and texted me a single emoji. No words necessary. The Doucet Group sale negotiations apparently continued. And according to what filtered back through the Houston commercial real estate community, Marcus was in excellent spirits. Confident. Expansive. He called me once during that period. I almost didn't answer.
Just checking in. How are you settling in?
Very well.
Good. I heard you're still at MedAxis.
I am.
Good. Whatever happened with that patent, the filing, did MedAxis end up taking it over, or?
It's being handled.
Right. Well, good luck with it.
Thank you, Marcus. I hung up and sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. He was checking, making sure the patent was still in play, still potentially valuable, still worth something he thought he owned. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Priya had already been on 3 calls with Helios MedTech's acquisition team, that the due diligence process was underway, that the co-inventor agreement had been reviewed by Helios's legal team, who had confirmed that the patent ownership was clean, clear, and fully enforceable, that there was no complication, no competing claim, no cloud on the title, because the document Marcus had signed, his proud, bold signature watched by witnesses, "I got everything" document, was legally unenforceable under 35 U.S.C. Section 261. A transfer attempted without co-inventor consent, worth exactly nothing. He was sitting in my house, sleeping in my bedroom, wearing his celebration watch, and holding a piece of paper that had all the legal authority of a grocery list. And 3 miles away, I was painting my new bedroom walls the color of deep teal, a color I'd always loved, and Marcus had always called impractical, waiting for the second thing to detonate. Because the patent was the first thing he'd lost without knowing it. But it wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing was coming. And unlike the patent, Marcus was going to feel that one in real time. I want you to remember something I mentioned earlier, about the financial discrepancies in Doucet Group's records, about the numbers that didn't reconcile, about the tip lines that exist for citizens who become aware of potential irregularities. I want you to remember that I am a careful woman, a methodical woman, a woman who spent 4 years building something precise and reliable and built to last. And I want you to remember that on a Thursday afternoon in early March, a detailed, documented, thoroughly organized report was submitted to the IRS Fraud Division's online tip portal. It was not submitted by me. It was submitted by my attorney, who had a professional and legal obligation to report evidence of fraud on the court that had come to her attention in the course of her representation. But I had given her everything she needed to write it. The grenade had been sitting in Marcus's hands for 6 weeks. He'd been walking around with it, celebrating with it, sleeping beside it every night in the house he'd taken from me. He just didn't know the pin had already been pulled. 6 weeks after the settlement was signed on a Tuesday morning in mid-April, my phone rang at 8:47 a.m. It was Marcus. I was at my kitchen table with coffee and my laptop reviewing the final due diligence documents Helios MedTech had sent over the previous evening. The acquisition was moving toward closing. The number $4.2 million split per the co-inventor agreement had been confirmed in writing. Priya and I had both signed the letter of intent. I looked at Marcus's name on my screen for 2 rings. Then I answered.
Renata.
His voice was different from the last time he'd called. No warmth, no Sunday morning quality. Something tighter, controlled but barely.
I need to talk to you.
Okay.
The Doucet Group sale. The buyer pulled out.
I said nothing.
Their legal team flagged something. Some kind of regulatory issue. They won't say exactly what. The deal is, it's on hold indefinitely. A pause. I think someone may have reported something to a regulatory body. I don't know who. I don't know why. But if you had anything to do with...
Marcus, I signed the settlement agreement. Doucet Group is your company, your assets, your obligations. I don't have anything to do with any of it. A long silence.
Right.
He hung up. I set my phone down on the table. I picked up my coffee. I looked out the east-facing window at the Houston morning light, coming in clean and gold across my kitchen floor. I felt something I want to describe accurately because it wasn't what people might expect. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't glee. It was something quieter and more serious than either of those things. The feeling of watching a long, careful equation finally balance itself out. The feeling of precision, of things landing exactly where the math said they would. I went back to the Helios documents. I had work to do. 11 days later on a Friday afternoon, the IRS Fraud Division froze Doucet Group LLC's primary operating accounts. I know because Denise Okafor called me. She'd heard it from Raymond, who'd heard it from 2 people in the Houston commercial real estate community within the same hour. In a business network that size news like that moves at a particular velocity. By end of business Friday, it was the conversation at every happy hour from Greenway Plaza to the Galleria. Doucet Group's accounts frozen. Marcus Doucet under federal investigation for tax fraud and misrepresentation of assets in civil court proceedings. Simone sent me a text at 6 p.m. It just said,
I need you to call me right now.
I called her. She answered on the first ring.
Nada. Are you seeing this?
I'm seeing it.
The Houston Business Journal just posted it online. It's public.
I know. A pause.
He had no idea, did he?
No, he had no idea. What happened over the following 72 hours, I know partly from Denise, partly from Joanna, and partly from a photo that Denise texted me on Saturday morning with no caption required. The photo was taken outside the IRS field office on Westheimer Road. Marcus was standing on the sidewalk in his good charcoal suit, the one he'd worn to the settlement signing, the one with the celebration watch visible at the cuff. He was holding his phone in both hands. His face, even in a photo taken from across the street, told a complete story. The color had drained from it entirely. Not pale, drained. The way a room looks when someone cuts the power. His mouth was slightly open. His hands, I could see even in the image, were not steady. He had dropped the phone at some point, Denise told me later, because a woman coming out of the building behind him stopped and picked it up off the sidewalk and handed it back to him. And he didn't even thank her, just stared at it. His knees, Denise said she'd been there, had seen it directly, had gone soft. He'd grabbed the railing of the office steps with one hand and held on. The man who had sat across from me in that conference room and told me to take what he was offering and disappear. The man who had signed his name bold and forward-leaning and slightly oversized because he'd always believed it carried weight. Standing on a sidewalk in his good suit, holding a railing, unable to trust his own legs. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the table and went to make dinner. 3 days after the accounts were frozen, Marcus's attorney filed emergency motions to contest the asset freeze. They were denied. Doucet Group's flagship property portfolio, the same portfolio whose sale had been Marcus's planned path to financial security post-divorce, was placed under a court-ordered hold pending the investigation. The prospective buyer, already spooked by the regulatory flag, formally withdrew. The house on Briargrove Drive, which Marcus had used as additional collateral on a Doucet Group loan the previous year, something I had not known, and Joanna had not known, was now subject to that same loan's default proceedings. He was losing the house too. My house. The house he'd taken from me. Vanessa Cole's Instagram went private on a Wednesday. By Thursday, mutual acquaintances reported she was no longer returning Marcus's calls. By the following Monday, Raymond Okafor, quietly without public statement, had formally dissolved Doucet Group's partnership agreements with her firm. Carla Doucet gave a brief statement to someone in their social circle, which made its way to me through Denise within 48 hours. I love my son, but I have never been involved in his business affairs. This has nothing to do with me. 9 years of sweetheart in front of other people. Gone in one sentence. Marcus called me on a Thursday night at 11:14 p.m. I was in bed reading. I looked at his name on the screen and I thought about not answering. Then I answered.
Renata. A breath. I need help. I know I don't have the right to ask. I know that. But I don't have anyone else right now, and His voice cracked. Please. I made mistakes. I can fix this. If we could just talk. Maybe there's something. I don't know. Maybe we could...
He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't bring himself to name what he actually wanted, which was for me to save him from the consequences of what he'd done to me. I lay there in my teal-walled bedroom in my east-facing apartment, in my quiet mind from floor to ceiling life, and I listened to him not finish that sentence for several seconds. Then I said, Marcus, you're not calling because you're sorry. You're calling because you're scared. Those are two very different things. Silence. Remember what you told me. In Derek's conference room. In front of witnesses. You told me to take what you were offering and disappear. You told me nobody was going to fight for me. I paused. You were right about the second part. Nobody fought for you either. Not Vanessa. Not your mother. Not Derek Nolan, who I imagine is focused on his billing rather than your well-being right now. Nothing from his end. Just breathing. Goodbye, Marcus. I hung up. I set the phone on my nightstand. I picked up my book. Outside Houston was doing what Houston does at 11 p.m. in April. Warm, loud, indifferent to anyone's personal reckoning. 3 weeks later, Joanna called to inform me that Marcus Antoine Doucet had been issued a federal tax assessment of $1.2 million in unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest. He had entered into a plea arrangement that included 18 months of probation, a structured repayment plan, and a permanent bar from serving as a financial officer of any corporate entity for 7 years. And the house on Briargrove Drive, my house with the backyard I'd always wanted, and the sage green kitchen I'd spent 3 weeks choosing, was sold at a court-supervised auction to satisfy the outstanding loan default. He lost it. He lost all of it. Every single thing he'd spent a year planning to take from me. 2 weeks after the auction, I drove past Briargrove Drive on my way home from MedAxis. I slowed as I passed. The new owners had put a pot of red geraniums on the front porch. A child's bicycle was leaned against the mailbox. The sage green kitchen was visible through the side window. Exactly the color I'd chosen. Warm in the afternoon light. A good family was living there now. Someone was being fed in that kitchen. Someone was being loved in that house. I drove on. The Helios MedTech acquisition closed on a Thursday morning in May in a conference room on the 32nd floor of a building in downtown Houston, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city in every direction. Priya and I sat side by side. Our attorneys sat beside us. The Helios team was across the table, 6 people, all of them precise and professional, and clearly accustomed to transactions of this size. The lead counsel slid the final agreement across the table. 2 copies, both already signed by Helios's CEO. I picked up the pen. I thought about the lab, the years of data, the failed calibrations, the 6 a.m. mornings and the 10 p.m. evenings, and the months when the clinical results weren't cooperating, and I questioned every assumption we'd built the device on. I thought about Priya sitting beside me through all of it, methodical, precise, refusing to cut corners when cutting corners would have been easier. I thought about the patients this device was going to reach, the families who weren't going to get that phone call. I signed my name. $2.1 million, my share per the co-inventor agreement, deposited into my personal account, the one under my maiden name, the one that had always been mine alone within 5 business days. Priya and I walked out of that building into a May afternoon in Houston, 91 degrees and thick with humidity, the way only Houston can be. And we stood on the sidewalk and looked at each other, and both started laughing at the same time. The kind of laughing that doesn't have a specific joke at the center of it. The kind that's just release. Just the body saying we made it. We actually made it. She hugged me for a long time. I let her.
4 years,
she said into my shoulder. 4 years, I said. We went to lunch at Brennan's of Houston and ordered champagne at noon on a Thursday, and I felt zero guilt about either of those decisions. The months that followed were the quietest and most deliberate of my life. I stayed at MedAxis, not because I had to. The acquisition meant I had options I hadn't had before, but because I wasn't finished. The work mattered. It had always mattered, and financial security didn't change that. Bernard, my HR colleague, stopped by my office 2 weeks after the Helios news became public in the industry. He knocked on my open door, leaned against the frame, and said simply, "Good, I'm glad it worked out the way it did." "Thank you for telling me about the call," I said. "When Carla contacted you." He nodded. "I should have flagged it faster." "You flagged it," I said. "That was enough." In June, MedAxis promoted me to Director of Innovation. New title, new scope, a team of 11 researchers reporting to me, and a mandate to identify the next ClearPulse, the next project that could change outcomes for a specific patient population that wasn't being adequately served. I accepted without hesitation. I had spent 9 years being someone who worked in a very small room, or so I'd been told. It turned out the room had been expanding the whole time. I just hadn't been looking at its full dimensions. I bought a house in the Midtown area in August. Smaller than Briar Grove, 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, a backyard with mature oak trees that dropped shade across the entire lawn on summer afternoons. I chose every paint color myself. The kitchen was a deep, warm terracotta that made the morning light look like something from a painting. The home office was teal, the same teal as my apartment walls, because I'd decided that color was mine now officially and permanently. Simone flew in from New Orleans for the first weekend. She brought her famous red beans and rice and a bottle of Prosecco, and we sat in my new backyard under the oak trees until 11 p.m., talking the way we used to talk before everything got complicated. About nothing. About everything. About Mama and Daddy and the Third Ward and the particular kind of stubborn that runs in Simone women, like a genetic fact. At one point, she looked at me across the patio table and said,
You know what I kept thinking through all of it?
"What?" I said.
That you were going to be okay. Not because of the money, not because of the patent, just because you're you. You were always going to figure it out. I just needed you to figure it out too.
I didn't say anything for a moment. The oak trees were moving slightly in the evening air. The backyard smelled like cut grass in summer. Inside the house, every room was exactly as I'd chosen it to be. "I almost didn't," I said finally. I almost signed what he offered me without fighting back. I was that close.
But you didn't?
Simone said. "No," as I said, "I didn't." I've thought a lot in the time since about why I almost did. Why a woman with my education and my analytical mind and my professional accomplishments came within a signature of accepting a version of herself that Marcus had been carefully constructing, small, brilliant, in a very small room, not the kind of woman people fight for. I've thought about the mechanism of it, how it works, how the most dangerous erosion isn't the kind that comes at you loudly and obviously, but the kind that comes quietly, disguised as your partner's preferences, their casual observations, their gentle recalibrations of how you see yourself. Every time Marcus said you're in your head, what he was actually saying was, your mind is not an asset, it's an inconvenience. Every time he asked careful questions about the patent's commercial value, he was treating my work not as something I'd built, but as something he could eventually claim. Every time I gave him grace for behavior that deserved scrutiny, I was making a deposit into an account he was planning to empty. I'm not saying this to condemn myself. I'm saying it because I think someone listening to this needs to hear it. The person making you feel small is usually not doing it loudly. They're doing it in increments, in small rooms, in questions disguised as curiosity, in advice disguised as care, in settlements disguised as generosity. Pay attention to the increments. Priya and I are already 18 months into the next project, a pediatric respiratory monitoring device for premature infants in neonatal ICUs. We have a small team, a solid data set, and a timeline that is ambitious but achievable. I am in the lab by 7 most mornings. Some nights I don't leave until 9. It still isn't burnout. It's still purpose. The difference is that now when I stay late, I am staying for something that is entirely and irrevocably mine. No one is watching me build it and calculating what they can take. No one is asking careful questions designed to establish future claims. I work in a room that is mine, and that room, as it turns out, is not small at all. Last month, I ran into Joanna Park at a charity event downtown. She looked exactly the same, reading glasses on a chain, the particular stillness of someone unbothered by human disaster. She hugged me briefly, which surprised me because Joanna was not a hugger.
How are you?
She asked. Good, I said. And then because it was true, and because she had earned the specifics, actually good, not surviving good, actually good. She smiled, a real one, not the small approving one from her office.
That's the best outcome. Not just the legal win, the actually good.
She was right. The legal win mattered. The $2.1 million mattered. The promotion mattered, and the new house mattered, and watching Marcus's entire architecture collapse under the weight of his own decisions, that mattered too, in the way that justice always matters. But the actually good, that's the thing you can't strategize your way into. That comes from somewhere else. From choosing quietly and deliberately to stop making yourself small enough to fit inside someone else's plan for your life. I am 41 years old. I am a biomedical engineer and a director of innovation and a co-inventor of a device that is going to reduce cardiac events in diabetic patients across the country. I am the woman who built something in a small room and then discovered the room had no ceiling. My name is Renata Simona Doucet, and I am exactly who I was always going to be. He just didn't get to take that with him when he left. If this story moved you, if you've ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to build you up, I want you to drop a comment below and tell me what's the one thing you refuse to let them take. Because the thing they can never reach is the thing that matters most. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because every story on this channel is about exactly that, women who chose themselves when no one else would. And that story never gets old.